I'm Lucy from Bookshanks and I'm here today to review two recent reads. It seems like a really long time since I put these books on my TBR, especially one of them. But by the time I got there, I'm really pleased to say that I thoroughly enjoyed them both. You'd kind of put them in a similar category. I think they'd sort of be called, women's fiction, that really hideous broad term, and probably pretty commercial fiction too. But they're actually really, really different in lots and lots of ways. The first one that I'm going to talk about is 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty, and the second is A Spark of Light by Jodi Picoult. And they do have similarities in the style of their writing, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're a million miles apart, but both really good at what they do. I'm going to talk about this one first, because I read it first. I always say that, don't I? Like to be linear. 9 Perfect Strangers is not a murder mystery, as I originally thought it was, but it is sort of a kind of domestic-ish noir. Domestic's probably not the right word, actually, because it doesn't happen in the house. It happens in a wellness retreat, and 9 people are going on this sort of holistic journey. They are each visiting this retreat for some reason that they, at least at the start, are keeping hidden from others, a little bit hidden from themselves as well, but basically they've been lured in with the promise that they're going to have a lovely time with their feet up. They're going to get massages, they're going to get, lots of green smoothies that are very, very good for them, and ultimately they are going to leave changed people. Of course, it doesn't really quite go to plan, and actually this wellness retreat is increasingly repressive in its own way, increasingly controlling, and it's run by a slightly bonkers woman called Masha, who has her own demons to contend with. And what happens is we follow each of these 9 people as they go on their journey through the 10 days of this wellness retreat. Now, it has a kind of Agatha Christie style setup to the book, which I really, really enjoyed. We meet each of these 9 characters and some of the people who work at the wellness retreat in turn. So the viewpoint in this novel changes really frequently. And at first glance, actually, they're kind of quite cliched characters. So you've got the young couple who've won the lottery and it hasn't brought them the happiness that they assumed it might. You've got the aging writer whose career is on the slide. You've got the washed up sportsman. You've got all these different people who at first glance, yes, seem to be kind of cliched, but they are drawn with such warmth and empathy that you still love them. And actually, they're very sort of self-conscious and knowing in their cliches as well. Because I think one thing about this book that I really loved is that in each of these people, you can see just a little bit of yourselves. You can see a little bit of someone you know. They are so incredibly relatable in their flaws, really, and all the little bits that put together make up who they are. Now, this book actually does work on sort of a similar layered way in lots of different areas, actually. Not just the apparently a cliche character, but actually really kind of elevated above that. At first glance, this is actually a really funny book. There is so much in it that had me giggling, that had a smile raised to my cheeks. It is a real book that pokes fun at the wellness culture as a whole, in us, exploiting all our insecurities and, making us feel worse about ourselves, really, and always driving for that perfection, which is completely unattainable. And it does it in a really entertaining way, whilst actually, at the same time, still kind of making us want to go to a wellness retreat. But at the same time, it has this emotional depth running through the characters, which is really raw and really touching, particularly in certain characters. The family that have gone there to get over the death of their son, or their son and brother, the woman whose marriage has broken up. There is real, genuine emotional depth to those characters, which was really, really raw and really heartbreaking. And I should say as well that there are definitely big triggers in this book around depression and suicide, and Moriarty really does explore themes around those and events around those things in quite a lot of depth. So if that's not your cup of tea, this is probably a book to avoid. But I think overall, the fact that it swings between sort of these emotional peaks and troughs, you know, the real humour and the lightness, and then the dark side of humanity and our emotions, makes it a really, really enjoyable read. I loved it. I really couldn't put it down. I just wanted to know what was going to happen next the whole way through. And it's written in a very accessible way that lets you turn those pages really, really quickly, but at the same time a really quality way. So the word choice is impeccable, I think. You know, she picks her language really with precision, and I guess it's that as well that keeps you able to move through at such a pace. Overall, this is actually a really simple book, and it's an uplifting book at its heart. I think it's one that skewers the wellness culture, absolutely, but picks you up at the end of it and goes, do you know what, you're all right actually without it, you don't need it. And one that I think has real emotional depth. It's funny, but it's painful at the same time, and it's ultimately all about people. There's no world building in here. They don't need to do any world building. This is a story about people just like you who have the potential for you to become, and what you can do, I guess, a little bit to deal with the emotions that happen to you in everyday life. And ultimately, you know, it really did actually leave me feeling quite uplifted, and also asking the question of just how drunk I would have to be to get 2 smiley faces tattooed on each buttock. Next up, I read A Spark of Light by Jodi Picoult, who's written a lot of books, 20-something books, and yet this is the first one I picked up, despite the fact that people keep telling me that I would love her. This one is probably quite a heavy one to go in with, I think, because it's actually set entirely during a hostage situation that unfolds in an abortion clinic. So the book starts and you are thrown straight into the middle of this hostage crisis. So it's a women's clinic in Mississippi. It is actually the only place in Mississippi where it is legal to get an abortion, and women travel from across the state to get their services. But it also does other things at the clinic, so you can get birth control, you can just go for a health checkup, and actually it's based on a real life clinic, which again is the only one in Mississippi where you can go to get these services. And when we meet the characters there, they are being held up by a gunman called George. And we are introduced to George through his viewpoint, and we are also introduced to a selection of people who are in the clinic. So some of the patients who are there for an abortion or for birth control or for these health checkups, and the doctors and the nurses that work there. We are also introduced to the hostage negotiator outside on the other side of the cordon, who happens by chance to be the father of one of the girls inside the clinic. So straight away, this is a really high drama situation. What then happens is actually we go backwards. It's a really unusual formula for a novel to cast back in time. So each sort of chapter, they're quite long chapters, they go through each of these viewpoints in each of the chapters, moves back an hour or 2 hours from that starting point. So what happens is we see how each of the people ended up in that clinic at that time, including the gunman and his perspective. And it's a really powerful way to tell a story. The sort of direct action is interspersed with the chunks of backstory that tell us more about the lives of those characters as a whole, but also take in so many more issues than just, abortion. Is it right? Is it wrong? We cover race in America. We cover, poverty and gun laws and gender and all these other big, really timely, big isn't a big enough word, enormous issues that America is grappling with at the moment, but also, to a degree, the wider world. And I do think this is quite a distinctly American story, but the resonance definitely goes beyond it. Religion as well, there's loads of that in there. Really huge issues, big issues. And I really liked it. What I didn't like so much, first of all, actually, was a little bit this going backwards, because you're so used to going forwards in stories that actually it's a bit confusing to go backwards. And I did have to keep stopping and working out a little bit where I was and why people didn't know certain things. You forget almost, or I forget, that they shouldn't know that, because it's, the timeline is not chronological. So it did confuse me at times. And to a degree as well, throwing you straight into the centre of the action without me knowing the people in there meant that I didn't feel the drama right up front that I felt like I really should have been feeling. But it did come, and actually it became so incredibly compelling to see through the eyes of all these different people. And I think what Picoult does really well is give voices to all the different sides of the arguments. I mean, she clearly is, on the side of pro-choice. And, she states that in her author's notes at the end. But she does strive to make the other viewpoints rounded and believable. I think that she certainly is striving for it, even if perhaps she doesn't always achieve it. And, there's only so sympathetic you can make someone who's holding a load of people at gunpoint and has already murdered several people. There's only so much you can do to make them sympathetic, but she is striving for it, I think, which is admirable at least. And I think that this really is a book about the message as much as the characters, and really whether the law is as nuanced as the human beings that it tries to serve. Really, how can they possibly make things black and white when these people are so very many shades of grey? And the things that have happened to them that bring them to this moment in time are so complex, I think, really, that how can you possibly legislate that in a way that makes everybody happy? I thought it was a really smart book, and a really moving one as well. I found it, a really powerful read, and a really upsetting and uncomfortable read at times, because it does get very graphic and give you detail that made me squirm and made me really uncomfortable to read. But I'm glad that I did read it, I guess, in a way. And I'm glad that, it's given me the questions in my mind to think about. So I think it is, a good starting point for debate on certain issues, even though, it can't possibly answer these questions. And actually, I think she says in her author's note at the end, there aren't answers to a lot of these questions. And, the sides of the debate are so incredibly far apart that there isn't really a way to bring them together. But I love this book for the debate that it started anyway. So even if I did get a little bit confused at the timeline now and then. Characters, did I talk about the characters? Yeah, pre-rounded, pretty good. Think I've done that. All right, we'll move on. So there you have it, A Spark of Light by Jodi Picoult and 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. Both kind of similar in some ways in the style of their writing, both a million miles apart. Don't really know what my point is with that, but I would recommend them absolutely both. So there you have it. If you've read any of these books, then I would love to know your thoughts. Please do talk to me in the comments below. Or also, actually, if you have read other books by these authors and you have some recommendations of what you think I should pick up from them, because I would definitely like to read both of them again, then I would so be interested to hear them. That's it. In the meantime, check out bookshanks.com and the apps. They're completely free, and I'll see you soon. Bye!